I'm Emilia, 28, and literally 3 days ago, my carefully guarded secret, my $9 million net worth, exploded in the most unexpected way. I'm a tech entrepreneur, the kind who built something from nothing, but to Ethan's snooty, old money family, I'm just the sweet girl from nowhere, who doesn't belong. That all came to a head at their sprawling estate, during what was supposed to be a celebratory pre-wedding dinner. The crystal chandeliers gleamed, the table was set with heirloom silver, and I sat there, gripping my fork a little too tightly, trying to smile through their veiled jabs about my cute little coding hobby. Then, out of nowhere, Ethan's mother slid a thick document across the table, a prenuptial agreement so one-sided it might as well have called me a gold digger. "Sign it," they said, "or the wedding's off." The room went dead silent when I didn't flinch. "You think you're protecting Ethan," I said, my voice steady, their eyes widening. "But you're about to learn who I really am." They froze, napkins crumpled in their hands, as Ethan's jaw tightened beside me. Here's the tea. Their ultimatum didn't break me, it lit a fire. I'm not just pushing back, I'm about to flip their entire world upside down, and change everything. A quick note, this story is copyrighted by the YouTube channel Guest Stories. Reposting, revoicing, or editing this content without permission constitutes copyright infringement. Thank you for respecting original creative work. Now, back to the story. I've always known Ethan's family saw me as an outsider. His parents, Margaret and Richard, are the kind of people who measure worth by pedigrees and bank accounts they didn't earn. Ethan, bless him, loves me fiercely, but he's been molded by their world, private schools, country clubs, and a family name that opens doors. I met him 3 years ago at a tech conference, where he was the charming investor with a disarming smile, and I was the scrappy coder pitching my startup. He saw something in me, something real, and we built a relationship on mutual respect. But his family? They've never let me forget I'm not one of them. I grew up in a small apartment, raised by a single mom who worked 2 jobs. My pedigree is grit, late nights, and a laptop that overheated more than it worked. I never told them about my company's success, not out of shame, but because I wanted to be loved for me, not my money. That dinner, though, was a calculated ambush. Margaret's smile was all teeth as she pushed the prenup toward me, her manicured nails tapping the paper like a countdown. "It's just a formality, dear," she said, but her eyes screamed, "You're not good enough." The document was brutal. I'd walk away with nothing if we divorced, even if Ethan cheated or left me high and dry. Richard chimed in, his voice dripping with fake concern. "We're protecting our son's legacy." Ethan's hand tensed under the table, his knuckles brushing mine. But he didn't speak. I could feel his conflict, torn between me and the family he spent a lifetime pleasing. Their cousins, aunts, and uncles, all seated around that endless mahogany table, watched me like I was a specimen under glass. I scanned the room, noting the way Margaret's lips pursed when I didn't immediately reach for the pen, how Richard leaned back with a smug tilt of his head. I could have signed it. It would have been the path of least resistance, the good girl thing to do. But something snapped inside me, not anger, but clarity. I'd spent years building something they couldn't even fathom, and I wasn't about to let them reduce me to a stereotype. My fingers grazed the prenup, and I pushed it back across the table, just an inch, enough to make Margaret's eyebrow twitch. "I'll need to review this," I said, my tone calm but sharp, like a blade hidden in silk. Ethan glanced at me, his eyes searching, and I gave him the smallest nod. I wasn't just fighting for myself, I was fighting for us, for the life we'd promised each other. The spark was lit, and by the end of this, they'd see me not as a threat, but as an equal. One they'd never dare underestimate again. As I sat there in the heavy silence of that dining room, the prenup glaring up at me like an accusation, my mind raced back to all the times Ethan's family had made me feel invisible. It wasn't a new feeling. It had been building for years, layer by layer, in those polished gatherings where I was always the odd one out. I remembered the first time it really hit me, about a year into dating Ethan, at his sister's engagement party. The estate was buzzing with guests in tailored suits and sparkling gowns, champagne flutes clinking like a symphony of approval. Ethan's sister, Victoria, had just landed a partnership at a prestigious law firm, old money connections paving the way, of course. Margaret had stood at the head of the room, her voice swelling with pride as she toasted to Victoria, carrying on the family legacy with such grace and intellect. The applause was thunderous. People nodding and smiling, Richard slapping his son-in-law to be on the back like he'd won a medal. I was there, tucked into a corner chair, my hand in Ethan's, feeling the warmth of his squeeze. But when the conversation turned to me, inevitably, because Margaret always made a point to include me, it was like flipping a switch. "And Emilia, dear, how's that little app of yours coming along?" she'd asked, her tone light but laced with that patronizing edge, as if she were inquiring about a child's lemonade stand. I started to explain the beta testing phase, how we'd secured our first round of users and were iterating on feedback, but her eyes glazed over almost immediately. She nodded vaguely, her fingers twisting the stem of her glass before interrupting with, "Well, isn't that quaint? Ethan, tell us more about your latest acquisition." Just like that, dismissed. Ethan shifted uncomfortably beside me, his thumb pausing on the back of my hand, but he jumped into the story to deflect, his voice a bit too loud. Victoria's fiancé leaned in to ask her about case law, and the room moved on, leaving me staring at the intricate pattern on the rug, my cheeks burning. It wasn't just that one night, it piled up in these specific moments that chipped away at me. Take Christmas 2 years ago, at their ski lodge in Aspen. Ethan's brother Alexander had been promoted to VP at the family firm, another notch in the belt of inherited success. Richard had pulled out a bottle of rare scotch, pouring glasses all around, his chest puffed as he declared, "Alexander's the future of our empire. Hard work pays off when you have the right foundation." They clinked glasses, laughter echoing off the wooden beams, Margaret dabbing her eyes dramatically like it was an Oscar moment. I sat by the fire, nursing my drink, when Alexander turned to me with that smug grin. "Emilia, still tinkering with computers? Must be fun, not having all that pressure." I forced a smile, clenching my jaw so hard I felt it in my temples, and mentioned how I'd just closed a seed funding round for my startup. Real investors, not family favors. But Margaret waved it off, her hand fluttering like she was shooing a fly. "Oh, tech is so volatile, isn't it? Better to stick with something stable like law or finance." She turned away, refilling glasses, while Alexander chuckled and changed the subject to his upcoming yacht trip. Ethan caught my eye, his brow furrowing in silent apology, but he didn't correct them. I excused myself to the bathroom, gripping the sink edge, staring at my reflection and whispering to myself, "You're building something real, don't let them dim it." These weren't isolated jabs, they formed a pattern, a history of me being sidelined while they exalted their own. Like at Ethan's birthday dinner last summer in that upscale restaurant overlooking the city. Victoria had announced her pregnancy, and the table erupted. Hugs, tears, toasts to the next generation. Richard beamed. "Our bloodline continues strong." Then, as if on cue, the spotlight shifted briefly to me. "Emilia, any big news on your end?" Margaret asked, her fork poised mid-air. I shared that my company had hit a milestone. We'd pivoted our algorithm and gained traction with major clients, projecting 7 figures in revenue. It was huge for me, a validation after sleepless nights coding in my tiny apartment. But Richard snorted lightly, wiping his mouth with a napkin. "Sounds risky. Alexander here just sealed a deal worth millions. Secure, you know?" Alexander nodded, his tie perfectly knotted, while Victoria patted her belly and said, "Family first, right?" The waiter came by then, and the moment passed, everyone diving into dessert menus. Ethan reached under the table, his fingers intertwining with mine, a quiet anchor, but I felt the sting, my free hand balling the napkin in my lap until my nails dug in. Each time it was the same. Their achievements were pedestals, mine were footnotes. They'd celebrate Victoria's court wins with elaborate parties, Alexander's promotions with family vacations, but my tech breakthroughs? Barely a nod. I never pushed back then, not wanting to rock the boat for Ethan's sake. He'd whisper later in the car ride home, "They're just set in their ways," his hand on my knee, eyes pleading. But sitting there now, at this pre-wedding dinner, the prenup still untouched, that history fueled me. Margaret's foot tapped impatiently under the table. Richard cleared his throat. And the relatives exchanged glances, their silverware clinking awkwardly. I realized it wasn't just about money or class, it was about control, about keeping me small so I fit their narrative, But I wasn't small. My fingers itched to reveal everything, to shatter their illusions. Ethan leaned closer, his breath warm on my ear, murmuring, "And we can talk about this later." But no, later was too late. The fire from all those ignored moments burned brighter, and I knew this was the turning point. That turning point wasn't just about the dinner or their disdain. It traced back to the secret I'd been nurturing for years, the one that started with a single, electrifying aha moment in my cramped apartment 5 years ago. I was 23, fresh out of college with a computer science degree, working a dead-end job as a junior developer at a mid-sized firm. The days blurred into nights of debugging code for someone else's vision, my ideas dismissed in meetings where the bosses, mostly older men with outdated views, patted themselves on the back for innovation that was anything but. One evening, after a particularly brutal review where my suggestion for a user-friendly AI integration was shot down as too ambitious, I slumped on my couch, laptop balanced on my knees, scrolling through forums about tech startups. That's when it hit me. A gap in the market for an app that streamlined freelance project management with smart matching algorithms, something that could empower people like my mom, who'd juggled gigs her whole life without the right tools. My heart raced as I sketched wireframes on a napkin, my pen flying across the paper, the idea crystallizing like a puzzle snapping into place. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I coded a rough prototype until dawn, my fingers aching but my mind alive with possibility. The struggle kicked in almost immediately, testing every ounce of my resolve. I quit my job 2 months later, cashing out my meager savings to bootstrap the thing. Mornings were coffee-fueled coding sessions at my kitchen table, the fan whirring to cool my overheating laptop. I'd hit walls constantly, bugs that crashed the system, algorithms that spat out nonsense matches. One night, around month 3, I stared at a screen full of error messages, my eyes burning from hours without a break, and slammed the lid shut so hard the hinge creaked. Tears came then, hot and frustrated, as I paced the tiny living room, doubting everything. "Who am I kidding?" I muttered to myself, kicking a stray sock across the floor. But I couldn't quit. This was for me, for proving I wasn't just another overlooked dreamer. I reached out to online communities, posting anonymized code snippets for feedback, my username a bland alias to avoid judgment. Slowly solutions trickled in, a tweak here, a library suggestion there, and I iterated, my code evolving from clunky to sleek. Money was the real beast, gnawing at me daily. I lived on ramen and freelance gigs, ironic, since that's what my app aimed to fix. My bank account dipping dangerously low. By month 6, I was down to my last $500, staring at eviction notices pinned to the fridge like accusations. I applied for loans, but banks laughed at a 23-year-old with no collateral. That's when I pivoted to crowdfunding, crafting a pitch video in my bedroom, ring light propped on books, my voice steady despite the nerves twisting my gut. I hit upload with shaking hands, watching the views tick up slowly at first, then surging as shares spread. Pledges came in, $10 here, $50 there, from strangers who believed in the vision. It wasn't much, but it bought time. $20,000 in total, enough to hire a part-time designer via Upwork, her feedback sharpening the UI until it gleamed. The challenges didn't stop. They morphed. As the beta launched to a small user group, feedback flooded in. Harsh, honest critiques that stung like slaps. "Matching is off," one said. "Interface lags," another complained. I'd wake up to emails at 3 a.m., rubbing sleep from my eyes, diving back into code revisions, my back aching from the hunched posture. Isolation hit hard too. Friends drifted as I canceled plans, Ethan not yet in the picture. My mom called weakly, her voice worried over the line. Are you eating? You sound exhausted." I'd lie. "I'm fine, Mom," while stirring instant noodles, the steam fogging my glasses. But each fix made it better, users sticking around, referrals growing organically. Then came the breakthroughs. Small at first but snowballing. By year 2, we'd hit 10,000 users, revenue trickling from premium subscriptions. I reinvested every cent, scaling servers that groaned under the load, my fingers flying over keys to optimize. A major pivot came during a late-night brainstorm, integrating AI for predictive analytics on project success rates. I coded it in a frenzy, testing iterations until it worked, the data visualizations popping on screen like magic. Investors noticed. Angel rounds followed, but I kept it quiet, negotiating terms in coffee shops, my hoodie pulled low to blend in. No flashy announcements. I didn't want Ethan's family or anyone seeing me as anything but self-made. The empire built in secrecy, layer by painstaking layer. Year 3, partnerships with big platforms, users ballooning to 100,000, revenue crossing $1 million. I moved to a better apartment but kept it modest, stashing profits into investments, stocks, real estate flips, that compounded quietly. Challenges persisted. A data breach scare had me up for 48 hours straight, patching vulnerabilities, sweat beading on my forehead as I typed commands, but we recovered stronger, trust rebuilt with transparent updates. By year 4, as Ethan and I got serious, the app evolved into a full suite: mobile integration, global reach, net worth climbing to $5 million, then $7, all hidden behind NDAs and private holdings. I confided in no one, not even Ethan fully. He knew the company existed, but not the scale, respecting my work-in-progress line. Now, at that dinner table, the prenup mocking me, that secret pulsed like a heartbeat. Margaret's eyes narrowed as I sat unmoving, Richard sipping his wine with forced casualness, the relatives' whispers like rustling leaves. My journey, the struggles, the triumphs, had forged me into someone unbreakable. Ethan's hand found mine again under the table, his grip questioning, and I squeezed back, a silent promise. This wasn't just my success, it was my weapon, ready to deploy. The room felt smaller, their judgment insignificant against what I'd built alone. But before that fire could fully blaze into action, right there at the table, with everyone's eyes locked on me, and the prenup like a ticking bomb between us, my mind pulled me back to how this fateful day had unfolded from the start. The anxious hours leading up to this confrontation, when my world was on the brink of exploding in more ways than one. It was early morning, the sun just creeping through the blinds of our apartment, casting long shadows across the kitchen counter where I stood, coffee mug in hand, steam curling up as I stared at my phone screen. My company was teetering on the edge of a massive deal. A buyout offer from a tech giant that would push my net worth well beyond $9 million, formalizing the empire I'd built in the shadows. The email had come in late last night, the subject line "Final Terms for Acquisition," and I'd read it in bed, Ethan snoring softly beside me, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might wake him. The terms were golden: full control retention for me post-merger, stock options that would secure our future. But I hadn't told anyone yet, not even Ethan. I set the mug down, the ceramic clinking against the granite, and rubbed my temples, feeling the familiar knot of tension building behind my eyes. I paced the kitchen slowly, my bare feet padding on the cool tile, glancing at the clock. 8:15 a.m. The pre-wedding dinner was set for 7 p.m. at Ethan's parents' estate, a sprawling place that always made me feel like I was stepping into a museum rather than a home. 3 days until the wedding, and this family gathering was supposed to be about final toasts and warm wishes. But I knew better. Ethan's family had been dropping hints for weeks, subtle emails from Margaret about traditions and protections, Richard's offhand comments during calls about ensuring stability. I stopped at the window, fingers tracing the edge of the sill, watching the city buzz below. My reflection stared back, hair tousled from sleep, eyes shadowed with the weight of secrets. The deal's timing couldn't be worse. Closing it meant revealing everything soon. But tonight? Tonight was about survival, about not letting their class-conscious judgments crack me before I said, "I do." I turned away from the window and headed to my home office, a small room crammed with monitors and sticky notes, the hum of the computer fan greeting me like an old friend. I sat down, chair creaking under me, and pulled up the acquisition docs, scrolling through pages of legalese, my mouse clicking methodically. The numbers jumped out. $15 million valuation, equity shares that would make me untouchable. But as I read, doubt crept in, my foot tapping restlessly against the desk leg. What if the dinner went south? What if their snobbery finally pushed Ethan to choose sides? I minimized the window and opened my calendar, the block for tonight glaring in red. Pre-wedding dinner, black dress. I leaned back, crossing my arms, feeling the soft fabric of my robe against my skin, and let out a slow breath. This wasn't just any milestone, it was the culmination of years. And I couldn't let their ambush, whatever it was, derail it. By mid-morning, I was in the bedroom, rifling through the closet, hangers scraping metal on metal as I pulled out options. Ethan emerged from the shower, towel around his waist, water droplets tracing down his chest. He smiled, that easy grin that always melted me a little, and wrapped his arms around me from behind, chin resting on my shoulder. "Nervous about tonight?" he asked, his voice muffled against my hair. I stiffened slightly, then relaxed into him, my hands covering his. "A bit," I admitted, turning to face him, our noses inches apart. "Your family, they have expectations." He sighed, his breath warm on my face, and pulled back to grab a shirt from the drawer, muscles flexing as he tugged it on. "They'll come around, they love you." I nodded, forcing a smile, but inside, my stomach twisted. He didn't see the microaggressions, the way Margaret's hugs were always a beat too short, Richard's questions about my hobby, laced with dismissal. I picked the black dress, simple, elegant, nothing flashy, and laid it on the bed, smoothing the fabric with my palm, feeling the silk slide under my fingers. Lunch was a distraction, a quick salad at the counter while I fielded work calls. My CTO texted updates on the deal, lawyers reviewing, all green lights. I replied with thumbs up, but my fork hovered over the greens, appetite gone. The impending dinner loomed like a storm cloud. I imagined their faces, the polite masks hiding judgment. I pushed the plate away, the fork clattering, and stood, needing to move. I went for a walk around the block, phone in pocket, earbuds in, but no music, just the city noise to drown my thoughts. Pigeons scattered as I stepped off the curb, my sneakers scuffing the pavement. Halfway around, a notification buzzed, Margaret's text, "Looking forward to tonight, wear something nice." My jaw clenched, thumb hovering over the screen before I typed a curt, "Can't wait." Nice? As if I didn't know how to dress for their world. Back home I showered, the hot water pounding my shoulders, steam fogging the mirror. I lathered soap, bubbles sliding down my arms, trying to wash away the anxiety, but it clung like residue. Afternoon blurred into errands, picking up dry cleaning, Ethan's suit crisp in its bag, and then makeup, perched on the vanity stool, brush in hand. I applied foundation, blending with careful strokes, watching my face transform in the mirror. Eyeliner next, steady line despite the slight tremble in my fingers. "You're ready for this," I whispered to my reflection, lips moving silently. Ethan called from the living room. "Almost time." His voice was upbeat, but I heard the undercurrent of his own nerves. I slipped into the dress, zipper whispering up my back, and added earrings, small diamonds I'd bought myself after the first big revenue spike. Standing back, I adjusted the hem, turning side to side, the fabric swishing softly. It fit perfectly, a armor of sorts. As the clock ticked toward evening, I sat on the couch, legs crossed, hands folded in my lap, staring at the wall. The company deal pulsed in my mind, a life changer, but so was this night. Ethan emerged, keys jingling, and extended his hand. "Let's go make them love you more." I took it, his palm warm and reassuring, but as we headed out the door, the lock clicking behind us, a sense of foreboding settled in my chest, heavy as the prenup I didn't yet know was waiting. The elevator dinged, doors sliding open, and we stepped in. The descent mirroring my sinking feeling. Tonight would test everything. And little did I know, it would force my hand in ways I'd only dreamed. As the elevator doors closed behind us and we descended into the garage, the hum of the machinery mirroring the buzz in my head, I squeezed Ethan's hand a little tighter, feeling the cool metal of his watch against my palm. The drive to the estate was quiet at first. The city lights blurring past the windows like streaks of judgment I couldn't escape. Ethan fiddled with the radio, settling on some soft jazz that did nothing to ease the knot in my stomach, his fingers drumming lightly on the steering wheel. "It'll be fine," he said again, glancing over with that reassuring smile, but his eyes flicked away too quickly, betraying his own unease. I nodded, my free hand smoothing the hem of my dress over my knees, the fabric bunching slightly under my fingers. The highway gave way to winding roads lined with manicured hedges, the estate looming ahead like a fortress of expectations. We pulled up the gravel drive, tires crunching softly, and parked among the sleek cars, Mercedes, Audis, all badges of their world. Ethan cut the engine, the silence sudden and heavy, and leaned over to kiss my cheek, his lips lingering a second longer than usual. "Ready?" he asked, voice low. I exhaled slowly, unbuckling my seatbelt with a click that echoed in my ears, and stepped out, the evening air cool against my skin, carrying the faint scent of blooming roses from their gardens. The front door swung open before we could knock, Margaret standing there in a pearl necklace and a dress that screamed understated wealth, her smile wide but not reaching her eyes. "There you are," she exclaimed, pulling Ethan into a hug first, her hands patting his back with genuine warmth. Then she turned to me, arms opening for an embrace that was lighter, quicker, her perfume overwhelming as she air-kissed my cheeks. "Emilia dear, you look presentable," she said, her gaze sweeping over my outfit with a quick flick, lips pursing just enough to notice. I forced a smile, my teeth grazing my lower lip, and murmured, "Thank you, Margaret. The house looks beautiful as always." She waved a hand dismissively, rings glinting under the porch light, and ushered us inside, her heels clicking on the marble foyer like tiny judgments. Richard was there next, glass of scotch already in hand, his handshake with Ethan firm and backslapping, but with me, it was a limp grasp, his palm cool and detached. "Good to see you, Emilia," he said, voice booming but flat, eyes already drifting past me to the gathering relatives in the living room. We moved into the grand space, chandeliers casting warm glows over antique furniture and family portraits that stared down like sentinels. About a dozen relatives were milling about, uncles in tailored suits nursing drinks, aunts perched on sofas with wine glasses balanced delicately, cousins scrolling phones discreetly. The air hummed with low chatter, silver trays of hors d'oeuvres circulating via a uniformed server whose steps were silent on the thick rugs. Ethan guided me with a hand on the small of my back, his touch a steady anchor as we accepted flutes of champagne from the tray. Bubbles fizzed against my lips as I took a sip, the cool liquid doing little to quench the dryness in my throat. Almost immediately the gauntlet began, subtle at first, like a drizzle before a storm. Aunt Lydia, Margaret's sister, approached with a saccharine smile, her earrings dangling as she tilted her head. "Emilia, how lovely to see you again. Tell me, are you still doing that computer thing? It must be so relaxing, not having to worry about real deadlines." She laughed lightly, a tinkling sound that grated, her hand fluttering to her chest as if amused by her own wit. I swallowed, setting my glass down on a side table with a soft clink, feeling Ethan's fingers tense against my back. "Actually, it's quite demanding," I replied, keeping my voice even, my gaze steady on hers. "We're scaling up, managing teams now." She nodded vaguely, eyes glazing, and pivoted seamlessly. "Oh well, Victoria's firm just won a huge case, international, you know. The pressure must be immense, but she's handling it brilliantly." Her emphasis on brilliantly hung in the air, a backhanded contrast as she turned to Ethan. "Your sister's a star, isn't she?" Ethan murmured agreement, his hand slipping away to grab an appetizer, leaving me exposed. It escalated from there, the questions coming like arrows wrapped in velvet. Uncle Harold, Richard's brother, cornered me by the fireplace, his cigar smoke curling lazily as he puffed. "So, Emilia, what's your family background again? Old money or new?" He chuckled, but his eyes were sharp, assessing. I shifted my weight, the heat from the flames warming one side of my face unevenly. "Neither, really. My mom worked hard to give me opportunities." He raised an eyebrow, exhaling smoke through his nose. "Admirable, but in our circles, legacy matters. Ethan's got quite the inheritance to protect." The word protect landed like a jab, his free hand gesturing vaguely at the room. I nodded politely, my nails digging into my palm behind my back, resisting the urge to retort. Ethan reappeared then, sliding an arm around my waist, but before he could steer us away, Cousin Beatrice chimed in from the sofa, her voice carrying over the murmur. "Emilia, that dress is darling. Where'd you get it? One of those online places?" Her tone implied discount bin, her friends tittering softly. I glanced down, smoothing the fabric again, feeling the seam under my fingertips. "A boutique downtown," I said, chin lifting slightly. "It's comfortable for long evenings." She smiled thinly, sipping her wine. "How practical." The barrage continued as we circulated, each interaction layering on the condescension. Margaret pulled me aside near the buffet, her hand on my arm light but insistent, nails pressing just a bit. "We're so thrilled for you two, but marriage is about blending worlds. Your independence is charming, but Ethan's responsibilities are substantial." Her eyes searched mine, waiting for deference. I met her gaze, my posture straightening, shoulders pulling back. "I understand blending. I said quietly, but respect goes both ways. She blinked, hand withdrawing, and busied herself with a napkin, folding it precisely. Richard joined then, clapping Ethan on the shoulder. Son, Alexander's deal closed today, multi-millions. Your turn soon? The implication clear, Ethan's success tied to family, not me. Ethan laughed it off, but his jaw ticked, visible only to me. By the time we sat for dinner, the weight of it all pressed on me, my fork heavy in my hand as servers placed plates. The relatives' glances darted my way, whispers hushed but audible. I took a breath, knife scraping lightly on china, steeling myself for whatever came next. Ethan leaned in, whispering, "You're handling this great." But inside, the contempt fueled a quiet resolve, my secret simmering, ready to boil over. As Ethan pulled back from his whisper, his breath still lingering warm against my ear, the servers finished placing the main course. Roast beef glistening under the chandelier light, steam rising in delicate curls that matched the tension coiling in my chest. I picked up my knife, the silver cool and heavy in my grip, and made a small cut into the meat, the blade slicing through with a faint scrape that seemed louder in the hushed room. Conversations around the table flowed in murmurs at first, forks clinking against plates, wine glasses being refilled with soft glugs from the decanter. Margaret sat at the head, her posture impeccable, napkin draped precisely over her lap, while Richard anchored the other end, chewing methodically, his eyes occasionally flicking toward me like he was sizing up a negotiation. The relatives filled the spaces between, their voices weaving a tapestry of small talk, stock market trends, upcoming galas. But I felt the undercurrent, the way glances darted my way, lips pursing before sipping drinks. It started subtly, as these things often do, with Margaret clearing her throat lightly, her fork pausing mid-air, tines glinting. "Ethan, darling," she said, her voice smooth but carrying that edge I'd come to recognize, like velvet over steel. "We've been thinking a lot about your future, yours and Emilia's." She smiled at me then, but it was tight, her eyes not crinkling at the corners, just holding steady as if appraising a piece of art she wasn't sure fit the collection. Ethan nodded beside me, his knee brushing mine under the table, a silent check-in. I set my knife down carefully, the handle aligning perfectly with the plate's edge, and folded my hands in my lap, fingers interlacing to steady the slight tremble. "That's kind of you," I replied, keeping my tone neutral, though inside, my pulse quickened, a drumbeat warning of the storm ahead. Richard joined in, wiping his mouth with his napkin in a deliberate fold before speaking. His voice deeper, authoritative, like he was addressing a boardroom. "Marriage is a big step, especially in our family. We've seen too many mismatches lead to complications." He emphasized mismatches, his gaze locking on mine for a beat too long, his bushy eyebrows arching slightly. The word hung there, heavy as the crystal glass he picked up next, swirling the red wine before taking a sip, the liquid catching the light in ruby flashes. Aunt Lydia nodded from across the table, her earrings swaying as she leaned forward. "Absolutely. It's about protecting what's been built over generations." Her agreement came quick, almost rehearsed, her napkin twisting in her fingers like she was wringing out doubt. I felt Ethan's posture shift beside me, his shoulders tensing, the fabric of his shirt brushing my arm as he straightened. "Mom, Dad, we've talked about this," he said, his voice calm but with an undercurrent of firmness, his hand reaching under the table to find mine, fingers squeezing once. But Margaret waved a hand gently, rings flashing, dismissing his interruption like swatting a minor annoyance. "We know, dear, but as parents we have to insist on certain safeguards." She reached into a small portfolio beside her chair, leather, embossed with their family crest, that I hadn't noticed before, her movements precise, unzipping it with a soft rasp. Out came the document, thick sheaf of papers bound with a clip, which she slid across the table toward me, the pages whispering against the linen cloth until they stopped in front of my plate. The room seemed to hold its breath then, silverware pausing, eyes converging on that stack like it was a verdict being delivered. I stared at it, the top page emblazoned with legal headers in bold font, prenuptial agreement. My stomach dropped, a cold wave washing over me, but I didn't reach for it immediately. Instead, I glanced at Ethan, his face paling slightly, jaw clenching as he shot a look at his parents. "What's this?" he asked, voice low, edged with surprise that bordered on anger, his free hand balling the napkin in his lap until the fabric creased deeply. Richard leaned forward, elbows on the table, a rare breach of his usual etiquette, his fingers steepled. "It's straightforward, son. Emilia signs this, ensuring that in the event of, well, anything, our family assets remain protected. It's generous, really, provides for her in case of divorce, but nothing extravagant." Generous? The word twisted in my mind as I finally picked up the document, my fingers grazing the cool paper, flipping to the first clause. It was anything but. I forfeited all claims to Ethan's inheritance, his future earnings tied to family businesses, even community property skewed in his favor. If he strayed, if he left, I'd get a pittance. A severance, they called it, while he'd walk with everything. My eyes scanned the lines, words blurring slightly as heat rose in my cheeks, but I kept my expression neutral, lips pressed into a thin line. Margaret's voice cut through, softer now, almost pitying, her head tilting as she watched me. "We don't mean to offend, Emilia, but you're from a different background. No safety net like ours. This protects Ethan, and you in a way, from any misunderstandings." Misunderstandings. The euphemism stung, her hands folding demurely in her lap, but her eyes gleamed with that class-conscious certainty. Uncle Harold grunted approval from down the table, his fork spearing a potato aggressively. "Smart move. Seen too many gold diggers in my day." The term landed like a slap, whispers rippling among the cousins, one of them Beatrice, covering a smirk with her wineglass, the stem twisting in her fingers. Ethan's grip on my hand tightened under the table, knuckles whitening, but he turned to his parents, voice rising just a notch. "This is ambush tactics. We discussed prenups. I said we'd consider a fair one." Richard shook his head, sighing dramatically, his chair creaking as he shifted. "Fair is subjective, son. Sign it, Emilia, or... well, perhaps the wedding needs rethinking. We can't support a union that risks our legacy." The ultimatum dropped like a gavel, the threat clear. Sign, or it's off. The relatives nodded in unison, a chorus of complicity, their plates forgotten as they watched me, expectant, like I was a defendant awaiting sentence. I set the papers down slowly, aligning them neatly with the table's edge, my heart hammering but my voice steady when I spoke. "This isn't protection, it's degradation." The words hung, Margaret's smile faltering for the first time, her napkin clutched tighter, while Richard's eyes narrowed, surprise flickering. Ethan leaned closer, his breath hitching, whispering, "M." But I didn't yield, my gaze sweeping the table, noting every micro-expression, the averted eyes, the tightened lips. The verdict was in. Unworthy unless I submitted. But inside my resolve hardened, the secret of my fortune a shield they couldn't imagine, waiting to shatter their world. The words had barely left my lips. "This isn't protection, it's degradation," when the room plunged into a thicker silence, the kind that presses in on you like a weight, broken only by the faint tick of the grandfather clock in the corner, its pendulum swinging methodically. Margaret's napkin slipped from her fingers, fluttering to the floor like a white flag she hadn't meant to drop, her mouth opening slightly, but no sound emerging, her cheeks flushing a rare pink. Richard leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking under his shift, his steepled fingers parting as he stared at me, eyes widening just a fraction, the smug certainty cracking like thin ice. Ethan inhaled sharply beside me, his hand releasing mine under the table to grip the edge of his seat, knuckles paling against the dark wood, his gaze darting between me and his parents like he was witnessing a collision in slow motion. The relatives froze in various poses. Aunt Lydia's fork hovering mid-air, a bit of beef dangling precariously, Uncle Harold's glass paused at his lips, wine sloshing gently, Beatrice covering her mouth with her hand, fingers splayed, eyes wide with shock. I sat there, heart thundering in my ears, my own napkin clenched in my lap, fabric twisting under my nails as I held their collective stare, refusing to blink first. Then, at that precise pinnacle of humiliation, with their judgment hanging like a guillotine, my phone vibrated in my purse beside my chair. A subtle buzz that cut through the tension like a lifeline thrown into stormy waters. I had silenced it earlier, but the persistent hum of an incoming call pierced the quiet, the device rattling faintly against the leather. Everyone's eyes flicked toward the sound, Margaret's brow furrowing in annoyance, her lips pursing as if this interruption was yet another mark against me. "Perhaps you should answer that," Richard said dryly, his voice regaining its authoritative tone, waving a hand dismissively as if to see no sense of propriety. Ethan glanced at me, his expression a mix of concern and confusion, his foot tapping once under the table. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the purse flap, fingers brushing the zipper, feeling the vibration travel up my arm like an electric current. It could be anyone, my CTO, a client, but the timing felt fateful, a cosmic nudge at my lowest moment. I pulled the phone out slowly, the screen lighting up my face in the dim dining glow, and saw the caller ID, my lawyer, the one handling the acquisition deal. My breath caught, a small hitch that I covered by clearing my throat softly, thumb hovering over the accept button. "Excuse me," I murmured, standing with deliberate calm, my chair scraping back against the hardwood floor, the sound echoing in the still room. Margaret's eyes narrowed, her head tilting as she exchanged a glance with Richard, who nodded curtly, his jaw set. I stepped away from the table, heels clicking softly on the floor as I moved toward the adjoining study, the door ajar and inviting a sliver of privacy. The relatives' whispers started up behind me, hushed, speculative murmurs like, "At dinner?" and "Who could it be?" But I ignored them, pushing the door open with my free hand, the hinges creaking faintly. Inside, the study was dimly lit by a desk lamp, bookshelves lining the walls with leather-bound volumes that smelled of old paper and polish. I answered on the fourth ring, pressing the phone to my ear, my other hand gripping the edge of the mahogany desk for support, fingers tracing the carved wood grain. "Emilia, it's Sarah," my lawyer's voice came through, crisp and excited, cutting through the line without preamble. "The deal's closed. They accepted the final terms, $15 million valuation, your equity intact, and the integration clause you insisted on. Congratulations, you're officially a powerhouse." Her words landed like a thunderclap in my mind, the numbers reverberating as I leaned against the desk, the cool surface pressing into my hip. My mouth went dry, a rush of adrenaline surging through me, making my free hand tremble slightly as I adjusted my grip on the phone. "Really? It's done?" I whispered, voice barely above a breath, glancing back at the door where shadows shifted. Someone, probably Ethan, pacing nearby. Sarah laughed lightly, the sound tinny over the speaker. "Signed and sealed. Wire transfer initiates tomorrow. You've built something incredible here. Time to celebrate." I nodded, even though she couldn't see, my eyes closing briefly as relief washed over me, warm and validating, erasing the sting of the table's contempt in an instant. The scale of it hit me then, fully and fiercely. My hidden empire wasn't just successful, it was transformative, dwarfing their inherited wealth with something I'd forged alone. My fingers tightened on the desk edge, nails digging into the wood, leaving faint marks, as flashes of the journey replayed, the late nights, the doubts, the triumphs now crystallized in this call. I ended the conversation with a quick, "Thank you, Sarah, talk soon," my thumb pressing the end button with a decisive tap, the screen going dark. Standing there, purse slung over my shoulder, I stared at my reflection in the darkened window, the glass showing a woman who looked composed but felt ignited, cheeks flushed not from shame but from power. The humiliation at the table morphed into fuel. This wasn't just a deal, it was proof, irrefutable evidence that I was no outsider to be pitied or. I slipped the phone back into my purse, the zipper rasping shut, and took a deep breath, chest rising and falling steadily as I smoothed my dress, fingers gliding over the fabric to center myself. The whispers from the dining room filtered in, urgent now, Margaret's voice rising slightly in question. But inside, a plan solidified. Not revenge, but reclamation. I'd draft a counter prenup tonight, one that mirrored equality, protecting us both, and reveal my truth on my terms. Hinting at it would start the reversal, forcing them to see me anew. I turned toward the door, hand on the knob, twisting it slowly, the metal cool under my palm. Stepping back into the dining room, the chandelier light hit me like a spotlight, everyone's eyes snapping up, expectant, irritated. Ethan half rose from his seat, concern etching his features, his napkin crumpled on the table. "Everything okay?" he asked, voice low but carrying. I nodded, resuming my seat with poise. Chair pulling in quietly and met Richard's gaze direct. "Better than okay," I said, my voice steady, laced with a hint of steel. "That was about my company. Turns out I'm not the one who needs protecting." The words dangled, a spark in the air, Margaret's fork clattering against her plate as she stared, the room's dynamic shifting in that single charged moment. My words. That was about my company. Turns out, I'm not the one who needs protecting. Landed in the dining room like a grenade with the pin pulled, the air thickening as if everyone had collectively held their breath, waiting for the explosion. Margaret's fork, already clattering from her earlier slip, now lay abandoned on her plate, the tines pointing accusingly toward me, while her hand hovered in mid-air, fingers curling inward like she was grasping for control that was slipping away. Richard's wineglass paused halfway to his lips, the stem tilting slightly in his grip, a drop of red liquid beading at the rim before dripping onto the tablecloth, staining it a deep crimson that spread slowly like a warning. Ethan's eyes locked on mine, wide and searching, his chair shifting back an inch with a soft scrape as he leaned forward, his napkin falling forgotten to his lap, bunching against his thigh. The relatives exchanged frantic glances, Aunt Lydia's mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, her earrings still swaying from the abrupt turn of her head, Uncle Harold setting his glass down with a thud that echoed, his bushy mustache twitching as he muttered something under his breath, too low to catch but laced with disbelief. Beatrice's hand flew to her pearls, twisting them tightly, the strands clicking together in the sudden quiet. I sat there, posture straight, my own hands resting flat on the table now, palms down against the cool linen, fingers splayed to ground myself as the power dynamic flipped in real time. The phone call's revelation pulsed through me, a warm surge of validation that straightened my spine further, but I didn't rush. I let the silence stretch, watching their stunned scramble unfold like a poorly rehearsed play. Margaret recovered first, or tried to, her voice emerging higher-pitched than usual, cracking on the edges as she leaned forward, elbows planting on the table in a rare lapse of her perfect etiquette. "What do you mean, dear? Your company?" she said, company like it was a foreign word, her eyes darting to Richard for backup, her foot tapping audibly under the table, the heel clicking against the floor in rapid succession. Richard cleared his throat, a deep rumble that didn't quite mask his unease, setting his glass down carefully, the base aligning precisely with the table's pattern as if order could restore his authority. "Emilia, this isn't the time for games. That prenup is non-negotiable if you want this wedding to proceed." His tone aimed for commanding, but his eyes flickered, avoiding mine for the first time, landing instead on the untouched document still in front of my plate. Ethan's hand found my knee under the table, his touch tentative at first, then firming into a squeeze, his thumb pressing in a silent question. "What happened?" I gave him the slightest nod, my gaze never leaving Richard's face, noting the vein pulsing in his temple, a tell I'd seen before in their family poker games but never directed at me. The scramble intensified, Cousin Beatrice whispered urgently to her husband, her words hissing out. "Did she just—" while he shushed her with a hand wave, his own face paling as he adjusted his tie, the knot loosening slightly under his fingers. Aunt Lydia fanned herself with her napkin, the fabric flapping weakly, her cheeks flushing as she stammered, "Well, I never, at a family dinner?" Uncle Harold grunted, pushing his plate away with a clatter of silverware, his chair groaning as he crossed his arms over his chest, mustache bristling like a defensive hedge. I drew a slow breath, the air filling my lungs steadily, and began to expose their hypocrisy calmly, my voice even, each word measured like code compiling without errors. "You've spent years dismissing me, my little app, my background, as if I were some charity case Ethan brought home. But let's be clear, that call was from my lawyer. My company just closed a $15 million acquisition deal." The number dropped like a bomb, gasps rippling around the table, Margaret's hand flying to her mouth, fingers pressing hard enough to leave marks, Richard's eyes bulging, his steepled fingers collapsing into a fist that he quickly unclenched, knuckles rapping once on the wood. Ethan's grip on my knee tightened, surprise flashing across his face, his lips parting but no words coming, just a soft exhale that brushed my arm. I continued, flipping open the prenup with one hand, pages rustling as I scanned a clause aloud. "The wife shall receive no claim to family assets." Hypocritical, isn't it? You've built nothing yourselves. It's all inherited, handed down like a crown you didn't earn. Yet you demand I sign away rights to what Ethan and I build together? The room erupted in a scramble of denials and justifications, voices overlapping like crashing waves. Margaret spluttered. "That's not fair. We're protecting our legacy," her voice rising, hands gesturing wildly, knocking over a salt shaker that rolled across the table, spilling white grains like scattered accusations. Richard interjected. "Young lady, you don't understand business," but his bluster faltered, his hand rubbing his jaw, stubble rasping under his palm as he avoided Ethan's gaze. Beatrice chimed in. "But your net worth can't compare." Her words trailing off as I met her eyes, my eyebrow arching just enough to silence her, her pearls clicking again as she swallowed hard. I pushed the prenup back toward Margaret, the papers sliding smoothly, stopping inches from her plate. "My net worth is $9 million pre-deal, more than enough to match your legacy. And I'll draft a counter prenup tonight, equal protection for both sides, no ultimatums. If you can't accept that, then you're the ones not worthy." Ethan stood then, his chair pushing back with a decisive scrape, napkin tumbling to the floor as he extended his hand to me, palm up, fingers steady. "Em's right. This stops now." His voice was firm, a boundary drawn in real time, his shoulders squaring as he faced his parents, jaw set. Margaret's face crumpled, tears welling but not falling, her hands clasping together in her lap, twisting the rings until her knuckles whitened. Richard deflated, leaning back, the fight draining as he muttered, "We didn't know." But I cut him off gently, standing to take Ethan's hand, our fingers interlacing with a click of rings. "You never asked, you assumed." The relatives sat stunned, whispers dying out, forks idle, the room's energy deflating like a punctured balloon. We made our exit then, powerful and united, my heels echoing on the marble as we crossed the foyer, Ethan's arm around my waist, his touch protective now. Margaret followed a few steps, her voice pleading, "Wait, let's talk." But I paused at the door, hand on the knob, turning the cool brass slowly. "Talk when you're ready to listen." The door closed behind us with a solid thunk, the night air rushing in cool and freeing, gravel crunching under our feet as we walked to the car, the estate shrinking in the rear view like a chapter closing. Ethan started the engine, headlights piercing the dark, and squeezed my hand again. "I'm proud of you." Inside satisfaction bloomed, not revenge, but respect earned, the hypocrisy laid bare for all to see. The car's headlights cut through the night as we pulled away from the estate, the gravel driveway fading into a smooth hum of asphalt under the tires, Ethan's hand still clasped in mine across the console, his thumb tracing slow circles on my skin that grounded me amid the adrenaline rush. The silence between us wasn't heavy like the dining rooms had been. It was reflective, charged with the aftershocks of what I'd just unleashed. Ethan glanced over at me every few seconds, his profile illuminated by passing streetlights, eyes soft but questioning, his grip tightening slightly as if to say, "We're in this together." I leaned back against the headrest, the leather cool against my neck, and let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, the tension uncoiling from my shoulders like a spring finally released. "That was intense," he murmured, voice low over the engine's purr, his free hand adjusting the rearview mirror unnecessarily, fingers lingering on the edge. I nodded, watching the dark trees blur past the window, their branches reaching like shadows we'd escaped. "Yeah, but necessary." My phone buzzed in my purse then, a soft vibration that I ignored at first, but it persisted, a group chat notification from my inner circle, the people who'd been my rock long before Ethan entered the picture. We didn't head straight home. Instead, Ethan suggested detouring to my favorite late-night spot, a quiet cafe downtown where the baristas knew my order by heart, black coffee with a splash of almond milk, no sugar. But as we drove, the texts kept coming, lighting up my screen. "Heard about the deal. Congrats," from my CTO Sarah. "Proud of you, boss lady," from my lead developer Mike, and an invite from my mentor, Dr. Elena Vasquez, the professor who'd first encouraged my coding dreams back in college. "Celebration at my place? The crew's gathering." I showed Ethan the message, the screen's glow reflecting in his eyes as he smiled faintly, the corners crinkling. "Go. You deserve this." He rerouted without hesitation, the GPS recalculating in its robotic voice, turning us toward Elena's cozy brownstone in the artsy district, a world away from the sterile opulence we'd just fled. My heart lifted a bit, the contrast already sharpening in my mind. the toxic scrutiny of that dinner versus the genuine warmth waiting ahead. We arrived around 10 p.m., the street lined with parked cars under string lights draped between lampposts, Elena's front door ajar with laughter spilling out like an invitation. Ethan parked curbside, the engine ticking as it cooled, and kissed my forehead before I stepped out, his lips lingering. "Take your time, I'll wait or join if you want." I squeezed his hand one last time, feeling the calluses from his weekend woodworking hobby, and headed up the steps, like the wooden porch creaking under my heels, the scent of jasmine from her garden wrapping around me like a hug. Inside, the space was alive. Warm lamplight bouncing off exposed brick walls, mismatched couches filled with familiar faces, a playlist of indie folk humming from speakers. Elena spotted me first, her silver-streaked hair tied back, glasses perched on her nose as she set down a tray of cheeses and grapes, her arms opening wide. "Emilia?" There she is, the woman of the hour. Her embrace was firm, genuine, her sweater soft against my cheek, smelling faintly of lavender soap. The group erupted then, about a dozen of us, my true allies. Sarah in her hoodie and jeans, clapping enthusiastically, her laptop sticker-covered bag slung over a chair, Mike with his perpetual 5 o'clock shadow, raising a beer bottle in toast, foam bubbling over the lip, a few other team members from the company, notebooks and phones scattered like evidence of an impromptu brainstorm, and mentors like Elena, plus old college friends who'd beta-tested my app in its infancy. No judgment here, no backhanded compliments, just pure, unfiltered support. Elena guided me to the center couch, her hand on my shoulder, fingers patting lightly as she poured me a glass of red wine, the liquid glugging into the stemless glass. "Tell us everything," she urged, settling beside me, her knee bumping mine companionably. I took a sip, the wine tart and grounding on my tongue, and glanced around, noting the details that made this feel like home. A whiteboard in the corner scribbled with algorithm ideas, dog-eared tech books on the coffee table, a half-eaten pizza box with greasy fingerprints on the lid. As I recounted the deal, the $15 million close, the late-night negotiations, the pivots that paid off, the room leaned in, eyes bright, interruptions only for cheers or questions. Sarah nodded vigorously, her ponytail bobbing. "That AI integration? Genius. I remember when we debugged it at 3 a.m., you wouldn't quit until it clicked." She mimed typing on an invisible keyboard, her fingers flying, eliciting laughs. Mike chimed in, setting his beer down with a clink. "And the user growth? Exponential because of your intuition, not some inherited luck." The word inherited hung innocently, but it struck me, contrasting sharply with the dinner's hypocrisy, where achievements were pedigreed or dismissed. Here, no one cared about backgrounds. Elena, a first-gen immigrant like me, squeezed my arm, her rings cool against my skin. "You've built this from scratch, Misha. That's real power." Her voice was warm, accented, her free hand gesturing emphatically, knocking a coaster askew. The evening unfolded in that genuine glow, stories shared over snacks, my fingers picking at a grape stem, popping the fruit into my mouth, juice bursting sweet. We brainstormed future projects, post-it notes appearing from Elena's drawer, stuck to the table in colorful clusters as ideas flowed. Laughter punctuated it all. Mike recounting a coding fail that nearly tanked a demo, his hands waving dramatically, nearly spilling his drink. Sarah pulling up metrics on her phone, screen shared via projector, numbers glowing as we high-fived over milestones. Ethan joined eventually, slipping in quietly, accepted without fanfare, Elena hugging him. The supportive partner, "Grab a slice." He settled beside me, arm draping casually over the couch back, fingers brushing my shoulder, his presence a bridge between worlds. In quiet moments the contrast hit hardest. At the dinner, every word was weighed, every glance a critique, forks clinking like accusations. Here, plates were passed freely, crumbs on laps ignored, voices overlapping in excited chaos. No ultimatums, just celebration. My achievements lifted up, not torn down. Elena raised her glass eventually, the room quieting, her eyes misty behind her glasses. To Emilia, self-made, unbreakable. Clinks echoed, glasses touching with soft tings, wine sloshing. I clinked back, glass cool in my hand, feeling seen, valued for who I was. As the night wore on, conversations deepened. Advice on scaling, hugs exchanged, the warmth seeping into my bones, erasing the dinner's chill. This was my chosen family, the judgmental one left behind in their echoing estate. Ethan and I left around midnight, his hand in mine again, the door closing behind us with a gentle click, streetlights guiding us home, my heart full in a way their approval never could. The drive home from Elena's brownstone was a quiet unwind, the city streets emptier now under the midnight glow of street lamps, Ethan's hand resting on the gear shift, fingers tapping lightly in rhythm with the soft radio hum. I leaned my head against the window, the glass cool against my temple, watching reflections of neon signs streak by, my body still buzzing from the wine and warmth of genuine cheers. Ethan glanced over, his profile softened by the dashboard lights, and reached for my hand, intertwining our fingers with a gentle squeeze that said more than words could write then. "That was nice," he murmured, his thumb stroking the back of my hand, the motion steady and reassuring. I nodded, my free hand fiddling with the seatbelt strap, twisting it slightly between my fingers. It was real. The contrast lingered in my mind, but as we pulled into our apartment garage, the concrete echoing the tires' low rumble, a new resolve settled in. The aftermath of the dinner needed addressing, boundaries drawn not just for me but for us. We stepped into the elevator, the doors sliding shut with a soft ding, and Ethan pressed our floor button, the panel lighting up under his touch. In the confined space, he turned to me, his eyes searching mine, brows furrowing just a bit. "About tonight with my family. We need to talk." His voice was low, earnest, his hand still holding mine but loosening slightly, as if giving me space to pull away. I didn't. Instead, I squeezed back, feeling the warmth of his palm, and nodded. "Yeah. Let's." The elevator ascended smoothly, the faint whir of cables the only sound, my reflection in the mirrored walls showing a woman who looked tired but determined, hair slightly tousled from the evening's hugs. When the doors opened, we walked down the hall hand in hand, our footsteps muffled on the carpet, keys jingling as Ethan unlocked our door, the lock clicking open with a familiar snap. Inside, the apartment felt like a sanctuary. Soft lighting from the lamp we'd left on, the scent of our morning coffee still faint in the air. I kicked off my heels by the entryway, the cool tile soothing my feet, and padded to the living room couch, sinking into the cushions with a sigh, the fabric yielding under me. Ethan followed, shrugging off his jacket and draping it over a chair, the hanger scraping lightly as he adjusted it. He sat beside me, close enough that our knees touched, his arm resting along the back of the couch, fingers brushing my shoulder absent-mindedly. "I'm sorry," he started, his gaze fixed on the coffee table, tracing the wood grain with his eyes, "for not speaking up sooner at dinner, for letting them ambush you like that." His voice cracked a little on ambush, his free hand clenching into a fist on his thigh, knuckles whitening before he relaxed it, fingers uncurling slowly. I turned to face him fully, tucking one leg under me, the couch shifting with the movement, and placed my hand on his knee, feeling the tension in his muscles. "It's not all on you, but we can't let it happen again." My words were calm, measured, but inside the memory of their faces, the smug certainty crumbling, fueled a quiet strength. Ethan nodded, his head dipping, hair falling slightly over his forehead before he pushed it back with a rake of his fingers. "I know, they've always controlled things, but seeing you stand up to them, it woke me up." He met my eyes then, his own shining with a mix of regret and admiration, his hand covering mine on his knee, thumb pressing gently. We talked then, really talked. The conversation unfolding like a map we'd both been avoiding, pinpointing the lines we needed to draw. First, the calls, they'd start soon, I knew. Margaret's texts had already pinged during the drive, her messages lighting up my phone screen. "We need to discuss this properly." I showed Ethan, the blue light casting shadows on his face as he read, his jaw tightening, a muscle ticking visible under the skin. "No more surprises," he said firmly, setting the phone face down on the table with a deliberate clack. "From now on, any family discussions happen on our terms, together." I agreed, my fingers tracing patterns on his knee, the fabric of his pants soft under my touch. We brainstormed rules. No unannounced visits, no financial meddling disguised as advice, and absolutely no ultimatums. Ethan pulled out his phone, typing notes in a shared app, his screen reflecting in his eyes as he tapped, Boundary 1, communication through us only. His typing was quick, decisive, the keyboard clicks punctuating our resolve, As we delved deeper, emotions surfaced, his frustration bubbling up, hands gesturing as he spoke of years under their thumb, his chair at family meetings always feeling smaller. "I've enabled it," he admitted, leaning forward, elbows on knees, fingers interlacing tightly until his knuckles paled. I listened, my hand on his back, rubbing slow circles, feeling the rise and fall of his breaths. "We break the cycle now," I said softly, my voice steady, pulling him back against the cushions, his head resting on my shoulder for a moment, hair tickling my neck. We drafted responses together, polite but firm texts to send in the morning. "We'll talk when we're ready, respect our space." Ethan read one aloud, his voice gaining strength, the words rolling off his tongue with newfound conviction, his free hand gesturing emphasis, palm slicing the air. The conversation turned inward then, to my own fortifications. I'd handle the counter prenup myself, emailing my lawyer first thing, but, more than legalities, it was about emotional walls. "I won't shrink for them anymore," I told him, standing to pace a little, my bare feet sinking into the rug, toes curling against the fibers. Ethan watched, nodding, his eyes following my path. "And I won't let them make you." We agreed on signals for future gatherings. A subtle hand squeeze meaning "back me up," a code word like "horizon" to exit gracefully. He stood too, pulling me into a hug, his arms wrapping around my waist, chin resting on my head, the embrace tight and protective. "We're a team," he whispered, his breath warm in my hair, hands rubbing my back in soothing strokes. By the time we wound down, the clock showed 2 a.m., our mugs of herbal tea cooling on the table, steam long gone, rings of condensation marking the wood. Ethan yawned, stretching his arms overhead, shoulders popping softly, and pulled me toward the bedroom, lights flicking off behind us with quiet clicks. Under the covers, he spooned against me, his arm draped over my side, fingers lacing with mine on the pillow. "New rules start tomorrow," he murmured, voice sleepy but resolute, his breath evening out into snores soon after. I lay there, staring at the ceiling fan's slow spin, blades cutting shadows, feeling the fortress build. Not walls to shut out, but boundaries to protect what we'd been. The aftermath wasn't chaos, it was clarity, rules etched in our shared determination, ready to enforce as the sun rose on a redefined future. The morning after our late-night boundary-setting talk, sunlight filtered through the bedroom curtains in soft golden streaks, casting patterns on the duvet that rippled as I stirred, my hand reaching out to find Ethan's side of the bed already empty and cool. The faint aroma of fresh coffee wafted in from the kitchen, pulling me upright, the sheets sliding down with a whisper as I swung my legs over the edge, toes curling against the hardwood floor. I padded down the hall, robe tied loosely around my waist, the belt ends swaying, and found Ethan at the counter, pouring a mug, his hair still tousled from sleep, stubble shadowing his jaw. He turned, smiling that easy morning grin, and handed me the cup, steam curling up to fog my glasses slightly as I took it, fingers wrapping around the warm ceramic. "Slept okay?" he asked, leaning against the counter, his own mug balanced in one hand, the other scratching idly at his neck. I nodded, sipping carefully, the hot liquid grounding me as I leaned beside him, our shoulders brushing. "Yeah, thinking about next steps." His eyebrow arched, curious, as he set his mug down with a soft clink, arms crossing over his chest, the fabric of his t-shirt stretching taut. We didn't dive right in, breakfast came first, a simple ritual, eggs scrambling in the pan with a sizzle, toast popping up golden, butter knife scraping across the surface as I spread jam, the sticky sweetness clinging to the blade. Seated at the small table by the window, forks clinking against plates, we talked logistics. The wedding still on, but scaled back, invitations already sent, but with a note to come about family adjustments. Ethan's phone buzzed midway through, Margaret's name flashing on the screen. He glanced at it, finger hovering over decline, then pressed it firmly, the vibration cutting off abruptly. "Not yet," he said, voice resolute, pocketing the device with a pat against his thigh. I nodded approval, my fork pausing mid-bite, a piece of egg dangling before I set it down, wiping my mouth with a napkin, the paper crinkling in my grip. But my mind was already shifting gears, beyond defense to offense, using this newfound leverage, my fortune solidified by the deal, to launch something meaningful, something that honored where I came from and redefined what success looked like, not just for me, but for others like me. By mid-morning, after clearing the dishes, plates stacking in the sink with clatters, water running hot as I rinsed. I retreated to my home office, the door clicking shut behind me, the room's quiet hum of the computer fan welcoming as I powered up, chair wheels rolling back with a soft rumble. Ethan poked his head in briefly, knocking lightly on the frame, knuckles rapping wood. "Need anything?" I shook my head, mouse clicking as I opened files, but he lingered a moment, hand on the doorknob, twisting it absently. "Proud of you, Em." His words warmed me as he closed the door gently, the latch catching with a click. Alone now, screen glowing blue on my face, I dove into planning, initiatives that would reclaim my narrative, turning the outsider label into a badge of empowerment. The primary focus crystallized: a foundation for underrepresented tech entrepreneurs, funding startups from single-parent homes like mine, providing mentorship I wished I'd had. My fingers flew over the keyboard, typing out a mission statement, keys clacking rhythmically, words flowing, empowering the overlooked to build empires from grit. The hours blurred as I fleshed it out, starting with allocating funds, $2 million for my post-deal windfall, numbers crunching in a spreadsheet, cells highlighting green as I adjusted formulas, mouse dragging across rows. I paused to sip water from a glass on the desk, condensation beating and dripping onto the coaster, a small puddle forming that I blotted with a tissue, the paper absorbing it with a crinkle. Next, partnerships. Emailing Elena, my mentor from last night, her response pinging back almost immediately. Let's brainstorm. Her enthusiasm jumping off the screen. I video called her then, webcam flickering on, my reflection in the corner showing determination in my eyes, hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail. Elena appeared, background her cluttered study, books piled haphazardly, her glasses slipping down her nose as she pushed them up with a finger. "Tell me the vision," she said, leaning forward, elbow on desk, chin in hand. We talked for over an hour, ideas bouncing like ping-pong balls, scholarships for coding boot camps, networking events in underserved communities, even a podcast series on self-made stories. I jotted notes on a pad, pen scratching paper, underlining key phrases, honor roots, redefine legacy. Elena nodded vigorously, her head bobbing, earrings swaying. "This isn't just charity, it's revolution. You're taking back the power they tried to deny you." Her words hit home, my pen pausing, ink blot forming at the tip as I absorbed it. This was reclaiming my own legacy, not Ethan's family name, but mine. The one built from my mom's sacrifices, her calloused hands from double shifts that I'd felt as a child when she'd tucked me in. I ended the call with a wave, screen going dark, and leaned back, chair creaking, hands rubbing my eyes, the pressure relieving the building headache. Afternoon brought more action, drafting legal docs for the foundation, tech browser tabs multiplying, nonprofit setups, tax implications, my cursor hovering over links, clicking through. Ethan brought lunch. A sandwich on a plate, crust cut off like I preferred, setting it down with a kiss on my forehead, his lips soft, lingering. "Fuel up," he murmured, hand squeezing my shoulder before he left, door ajar this time. I ate absently, crumbs falling onto the keyboard, brushed away with a swipe of my hand, mayo smearing slightly on the keys that I wiped with a napkin corner. By evening the framework solidified, named Gritforge Foundation, a nod to forging success from raw determination. I wired initial funds, banking app confirming with a green checkmark, a satisfying ping echoing. Then the launch plan, a virtual announcement next week, inviting my allies, press releases drafted in a doc, words bolded for emphasis. As dusk fell, shadows lengthening across the desk, I stood, stretching arms overhead, vertebrae popping softly, and walked to the window, fingers parting the blinds to peek at the city lights twinkling on. This initiative wasn't revenge, it was impact, creating ripples that would outlast any family snub, honoring my roots, my mom's immigrant hustle, my own late-night codes, while redefining success as inclusive, not exclusive. Ethan called from the living room. "Dinner's ready," his voice carrying warmly. I closed my laptop with a snap, the lid clicking shut, feeling empowered, legacy reclaimed on my terms, one strategic move at a time. The initiatives for the Gritforge Foundation were still fresh on my screen, the laptop's glow fading as I powered it down that evening, the fan whirring to a stop with a final sigh that mirrored my own exhale of accomplishment. Ethan had called me to dinner, his voice carrying from the kitchen where pots clattered and the sizzle of stir-fry filled the air. But I lingered in the office a moment longer, chair pushed back with a soft roll of wheels, standing to stretch my arms overhead, feeling the pull in my muscles from hours hunched over keys. The window reflected my silhouette against the darkening sky, city lights beginning to wink on like distant stars, and in that quiet interlude, alone with the hum of the apartment settling around me, a profound realization washed over me. Not a thunderclap, but a gentle tide, lapping at the edges of my thoughts until it flooded in fully. My worth wasn't tied to their approval, or even to the empire I'd built. It was something deeper, internal, a quiet flame that had burned steadily through every dismissal, every late-night doubt. I walked slowly to the door, hand trailing along the desk's edge, fingers brushing the smooth wood, tracing the grain like mapping a journey I'd already traveled. The hallway light spilled in as I opened it, the knob turning cool and familiar under my palm, and I paused there, leaning against the frame, eyes closing briefly as memories surfaced, not in a rush but one by one, like pages turning in a well-worn book. I saw my younger self, 23 and scared. Quitting that soul-crushing job, laptop balanced on a rickety table in a dim apartment, code lines blurring through tired eyes, fingers aching from typing but refusing to stop. The aha moment hadn't been about money, it was about claiming space in a world that overlooked people like me. Then the struggles, the ramen dinners, the rejection emails stacking in my inbox, each a punch that left me breathless, curled on the couch with a blanket pulled tight, whispering to myself, "You can do this." My hand clenched the doorframe now, nails digging lightly into the paint, feeling that old resilience echo in my chest. Deeper still, the realization rooted in my mom, her face in my mind's eye, lined from years of waitressing shifts, her hands rough when she'd cut my cheek after school, saying, "You're smarter than this world gives you credit for." She'd never know the full scale of what I'd built, passing too soon. But her belief was the seed, internal and unshakable, not dependent on external validations like Margaret's nods or Richard's handshakes. I released the doorframe, hand dropping to my side, fingers flexing open, and stepped into the hall, the carpet soft underfoot, each step a affirmation. The dinner ambush replayed, their faces twisting in shock, the prenup sliding back untouched. But it didn't sting anymore. It was a mirror, reflecting their insecurities, not mine. My secret fortune, the deal, the foundation, they were extensions of that inner worth, tools to amplify it, but not the source. In the kitchen, Ethan stirred the pan, spatula scraping metal, steam rising fragrant with garlic and soy. He looked up, smiling, but paused at my expression, setting the spatula down with a clatter on the counter, wiping his hands on a dish towel slung over his shoulder. "You okay?" he asked, voice soft, stepping closer, his hand reaching for mine, fingers intertwining naturally, his thumb brushing my knuckles. I nodded, pulling him into a hug, my chin resting on his shoulder. Arms wrapping around his back, feeling the steady beat of his heart against mine. "Better than okay," I murmured, the words muffled in his shirt, inhaling the faint scent of his cologne mixed with cooking spices. We stood like that, swaying slightly, no words needed, the realization crystallizing. Peace came from within, from knowing I'd honored my path, not in spite of their judgments but irrespective of them. Pulling back, I met his eyes, my hands on his arms, squeezing gently, feeling the muscle under my palms. "I get it now. My value isn't what they think, or even what I've achieved. It's here." I tapped my chest lightly, over my heart, the thump echoing softly. Ethan nodded, his eyes shining, hand covering mine there, pressing it in place. "You've always had it. I'm just glad you're seeing it too." We sat to eat then, plates clinking as he served, forks picking up bites, but the meal was secondary to the quiet reflection unfolding inside me. Each chew, each swallow, grounded me further. The flavors bursting, but my mind wandering to future days, weddings without ultimatums, initiatives blooming without needing their applause. The peace settled like a blanket, warm and enveloping, erasing the last traces of doubt. Later, as we cleared the table, plates stacking in the sink, water running to rinse, suds bubbling under the stream, I glanced out the kitchen window, stars faint against the city haze, and felt it fully. Self-validation wasn't a destination but a state, internal and eternal. No more chasing shadows of approval, I was whole, worthy, at peace with the woman staring back in every reflection. Ethan dried a plate, towel swishing, and bumped my hip playfully, his laughter light, but inside, the realization anchored me, a quiet triumph that needed no audience. Have you ever hidden a part of yourself to fit in, only to realize it was holding you back? That's what hit me after turning the tables on Ethan's family. My secret wealth wasn't just about money, it was proof of my inner strength, built from years of grit and quiet determination. Revealing it didn't just shock them, it freed me to see that true respect starts within, not from snobby in-laws or one-sided prenups. By drafting that fair counter-prenup and launching my foundation, I redefined our relationships on equality and boundaries, showing Ethan how to stand firm too. It's empowering to know your worth isn't up for debate. So what do you think? Did I turn the tables enough, or should I have gone further? Drop a comment below with your take, and share if you've ever flipped a tough family dynamic. Your stories inspire me. Don't forget to like, subscribe for more real-life tales of resilience, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Remember, your value is yours to claim. Don't let anyone dim it. Keep shining out there.